Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Over the weekend, over Memorial Day weekend, I had our yearly booth at our local Little Azalea Festival. 2003 was the first time we had a booth there, and that it gives me the opportunity to talk to the local people in this small town that I live in. It has allowed people in this area to see that the plan is moving forward. I put a sign up that says members in X number of countries, and each year as they walk by, the same people probably walk by year after year, and they can see that the number on my banner keeps changing. It went, the first year we had members like in 27 countries, and now it's 87. So that's a lot of people who like the plan for world peace. And to be able to see that it's growing and that people are changing, they might not have come the first 15 years, but maybe they'll start thinking about it when people are open to it. Now that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is how world peace affects individuals. When you look at a nonprofit organization, you say, I don't want to get involved with that. I have my own life to deal with. Let them do that. That's their job if they're interested in it. Then that's fine. Nobody has to really join a nonprofit organization. But what would motivate people to join is when they see how it can affect them on an individual basis. Because we all function all on the individual basis and on the global basis, and we're all part of every level of society when you stop and think of it. On the international level, we see the news and we see that like the pandemic has affected one area. The virus is coming out and it's going to affect us eventually, and all these different levels that we work on, where if two nations are at dispute and one of them is our own individual nation, then that affects us too. It's not just things that are happening on the other side of the world. We have the environment. We have how the world leaders solve problems, or more importantly, don't solve problems that we have to consider. So that we have all of these ideas. So world peace is a very, very big idea, but it also affects us on the individual basis, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. We're always functioning on all these different levels, and it impacts us whether we like it or not. So we have to understand how it affects us. Like for example, if they put if the world leaders get together and there's going to be some sort of a summit that discusses certain things, it can affect the trade. It can affect us on an individual basis. Laws are passed in Congress and we don't know about it, and all of a sudden the food prices go up, or Medicare is going to be cut, or Social Security is cut, and we are not even aware necessarily because we're living our own lives on a different level. So we have to understand how world peace is going to affect us too. And the idea is so huge. Now, our government proposals are designed in such a way that they are going to parallel where we are as individuals. Now, the reason I say that is so that you can understand how to solve your problems in your own life with the same way that the governments are doing it with the government proposals. So, for example, it's like if you think of yourself as like parallel to a country, for example, the 200 independent members of our organization were each parallel to a country and like a world leader. And so the events in our families are similar to that. So think of it like 200 different plots for a movie. You know, you see the same movies over and over again, and the plots are the same. And you know how it's going to turn out. But what happens if there are 200 different stories, possible stories in the world going on right now, 200 different plots, and each one of those plots has to have a solution, has to have a way for everybody to come out with a happily ever after at the end. Okay, so the first story that we're looking at is the relationship between the United States and Iraq. And the government proposals for the planning that go with it introduce a solution for... My cat is here. Hi, cat. Meow. She likes my attention. So I work out of a warehouse, and I usually keep the door open so she can come in and go out. But here, why didn't you find someplace else to sit? Sit right over there. Sit right here. Okay. So imagine that the first, what we want to do for world peace is we want to put these government proposals in a certain particular order, so that by the time we reach the last plot, world peace is here. Okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be all 200 stories that we deal with. We just have to do the ones in crisis. And, in the movie Dragnet, the television story, they said there's millions of stories going on in this city, Los Angeles. There's many, many stories happening all at the same time. Which story is going to be told? So we're looking at, we want to take the idea from the beginning of the crisis and carry it through all the way to the end. And that's what you'll see with everything that we're doing. We're introducing an idea, addressing the root cause of the problem, and then following it through all the way to the end, like our newsletters. For example, we have, let's say, the first one is the worst case scenario, and then we're going to follow it through. Each issue is going to address one of the stories, and then carry it all the way through to the end. When we do that, then people can follow along and apply the same information in their own lives and look at it and compare. If it doesn't have anything to do with you, that's one thing. But if it has something to do with you, or if it makes you angry in some way or upset, then it's probably something that you should pay attention to. Okay, that's kind of the whole idea of world peace. It's like we're in a crisis situation. If you were an alcoholic, for example, and you had gone for a period of time thinking, or a diabetic, or any of these, you go for a period of time and then you think what you're doing is working, and then you reach the point where it stops working, and then you fall into the abyss. And then you have to figure out how to get out of the abyss. Again, back to square one. If you are joining Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, a nonprofit organization, you go up, and then you're hopefully back, not to where you were in the past necessarily. If you've lost your family and they're not coming back for some reason, then you might end up in a different relationship with somebody. But basically, what you want to do is get back to the point where you were, and then not necessarily there, but if that wasn't working for you, then you might want to figure out, how to get your life. So that's where world peace is not necessarily back to square one where we were before, but higher, on a higher level, where you are creating the life you want, not necessarily there. Our planning steps are 22 steps. A 12-step program gets you back to square one. A 22-step gets you to world peace, where you wanted to be in the first place. So let's say that going into the crisis isn't necessarily the idea to get back. You want to go much higher. There's a better way to do that, though, but people generally have to be squeezed to let go of the old idea and then come into the new. This happened with George W. Bush with the preemptive strike in Iraq. So on a comparing this basis to how this works, imagine that the United States had been using regime change as a foreign policy, and it had seemed to be working for a period of time. And then, when no weapons of mass destruction were found, it put us into the abyss. We got into a quagmire, and we couldn't figure out how to get out of it. It was like we couldn't stay and we couldn't leave. So then what we had to do is figure out where we are, and then we had to kind of work our way out of it. Where you are, the United States is still at the bottom of the abyss. We lost our power base. We collapsed our power base. Well, some people think we still have it. Like the Republicans are saying to the Democrats, don't throw away our power. Well, the Republicans had already thrown away our power with the preemptive strike. And so we have to know where we are, the principles associated with each of these ideas. We have to know the root cause of the problem, the principles of the problem, why it worked, why it didn't work. And then what we can do is we have to recognize it. So, they say never again. Now, that's where we are, is never again. Then what we have to do is we have to figure out how to get out of it. Okay, if you are overweight, for example, what's causing you to gain all this weight? You see all these people, these guru-type people on television, on the YouTube videos and things like that, talking about, well, it's this, and this, and all you have to do is this. And, these people lost 200 pounds, and it doesn't necessarily help you. So you have to figure out what it is that you did wrong. This is the same thing that's happening now with getting out of the pandemic. We went along for a period of time, and then we went into the abyss. And are we going to go back to square one, or are we going to go up to the point where we're all creating our life? How do we get out of this abyss? And, for example, is it going to be like a war between the Republicans and the Democrats? Or in other countries, is it going to be like in Brazil or India or Israel and the Palestinian issue, or England and the Brexit issue, South Africa? All of these outbreaks with the new mutations and variants, those are new conflicts where people equate others with snakes. That's where it came out. So if the U.S. government goes to China and blames them, does that solve the problem? You are snakes. Does that solve the problem? No, it doesn't. So we have to figure out. So we're going to go with our first government proposal and our newsletter that explains all the principles associated with it, the application of the principles, how you might know the principles, like you have to lose weight, but are you going to be able to actually apply them in your own life? How do you do that? How do you come up with ideas? And then the training or the planning ideas that allow you to go forward to your next step in this evolutionary process. Our first government proposal is how everybody got into the abyss in the first place, the worst case scenario that we're in right now. Like the climate crisis. How do we get out of that situation? How do we deal with that? Is this going to mean a mass migration that we're all going to go up to the Arctic Circle and live, or on the south? If people are going to head different directions, north or south, how are we going to deal with that? Is this going to be like permanent change, like what happened when our ancestors, many of our ancestors, moved out of Africa? 60,000 years ago, according to my ancestors, moved out of Central Africa, and they moved north, and then they went through the Middle East, and then they went up into Russia, and then they went to Poland, and they went into different areas. So how much has changed since then? Was that the way to solve the problem? Okay, can we solve problems without people moving? How do we deal with the drought situation? All these different problems are things that can be solved, and we just don't know how to do it yet. Because what we want to do is create heaven on earth for everybody. And to do that, we need to have God's help to do that. That's where the prophets come in. I'm a prophet. I am a psychic, and I help. By working with the prayer circle and such, we started to get answers to our prayers so we can solve these problems. The plan for world peace came with the help of God, the creator of us all. Not the God of one particular religion, but the God who created all of us, including the aliens, which is another thing that's coming out. How do we solve the situation with aliens? Do we go to war with them? Or how do we know who to trust? And that's the first idea. So what I'd like you to do is understand that world peace is not just joining an organization and saying, okay, we're going to, hug trees for a while, or we're going to save the wildlife in a certain place, like the gorillas in Rwanda, or are we going to save the whales, which is great. I have no problem with that, because world peace is big, but inside of it are all the things that people really care about. And if you care about the whales, then work on saving the whales. If you care about saving the gorillas, then work on saving the gorillas. But work within this structure of understanding why there's a problem in the first place, and solve the whole problem, not just saying, I'm going to come and I'm going to make you do what I want you to do, because there's so much resistance already. We have to look at all these ideas. So the first whole idea is related to our exit strategy for Iraq, but at the same time, is the United States going to work to solve this problem? Are we going to address, as our country, what would make us address this idea now? It's been swept under the table. People are saying, hey, that happened 19 years ago. So sweep it under the rug. People don't even remember that. People in Iraq don't even remember it now. Move on. Just forget it. Move on. It's over. We don't have to pull that. That's not going to work. Because if there's like a cancer, covering that up, putting a Band-Aid on a cancer doesn't solve the problem. Okay, so now, that's where we are now. Is we're looking at how world peace affects us each on an individual basis. If we are going along for a period of time as an alcoholic, or somebody who's 500 pounds overweight, or has a health issue like cancer, how about the pandemic? Thousands of people have died. Hundreds of thousands of people have died around the world. Falling into the abyss, how do we come out? How do we go back to square one? Business as usual. Okay, is the economy going to go back to normal? What is the new normal about this? Is there a new normal? What if we can figure out how to bring it up here? If we have 200 families, 200 countries, and each of those countries is able to create a niche, and based on what they have, like an individual family, you create your own niche, you create a vocation and an avocation, and everybody's working together in a country, in a family. You have everybody functioning on a higher level, One person comes out of the abyss, pulls everybody else up, and suddenly the entire family is working up here. Suddenly the entire country is working. Suddenly the entire world sees that it's possible for one person, one family, one nation, one world to come out of the abyss. If we can apply all this information one step at a time, like learning how to read. If one family can teach people how to read, then basically that's kind of the preliminary step. How about the next step is to learn how to do mathematics, arithmetic, starting with adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Then you can do something like you can start a business. You can write a book. You can start a business selling books. You can do this, and the next thing is to maybe learn how to talk to people. Maybe what is the book going to be about? And so you're always working on one idea and developing the idea. Then the next person is developing their idea, going through the process and working out of the abyss. So that's where we are now as a world. World peace is not joining an organization. It might be joining an organization, but it comes down to the individual level. It comes down to the family level. It comes down to the idea of a nation. We're a nation. We're a world. We are part of, if the UFO stuff is coming out now, are they going to brush it under the rug again? Because it's too much for people to accept now. We don't want a bunch of stuff like that. Or is it part of our connection with the universe? We're talking about the first step is universal law. For us to go out into the stars, are we going to go out there as conquerors? Are we going to take our disputes, earthly disputes, into space and then shoot each other down up there, like they do, like a dogfight on the planet, with airplanes? Do we have to be Luke Skywalker fighting the Empire? What are we doing? Okay, do we want that as our future? What future do we want? And that's what I wanted to just talk about today. I met some people over the weekend, a husband and wife from Senegal, and they had the booth next to mine, and they were selling beautiful baskets. They sold a lot of baskets over the weekend. And when they did that, they had taken from Senegal their own families and friends and the people there, and they had taken these baskets and brought them to the United States, brought them to my little town, and then they were selling them. Many, many people bought those baskets. They were beautiful. In fact, I bought one of them too. And then what they did was they imagined that these people in Senegal and Gambia, they have grass, and they have, I don't know where they get their, I should have asked where they get their colors, their tints. And then they also had certain leather on the handles. So imagine they take grass, dry it and weave it into these beautiful baskets. Some of them are like this big around, and some of them were market baskets. Some of them were like the kind of thing that you would carry your personal things in. Some of them were like for yarn, holding yarn if you're a knitter and you can put your yarn in it. And some of it were just beautiful. I mean, they were all beautiful. The different colors, they were beautiful. And then, so imagine those people take grass. They take, let's say they hunt, or the leather that they use for the handles, to cover the handles, is something where maybe they have their own food supply and they use that leather, and they take it and they're eating the small animals, and they're like rabbits, maybe, for example. They grow rabbits and they use rabbit skin, and they take off the fur, and then they have this for the handle. Now imagine how it's just natural resources that are there, and they take them, they put them into something beautiful, and then they sell them on the other side of the world. This husband and wife brings them here and then sells them, and they're beautiful. So in other words, what I'm saying is, what do we have what do we have that's around us all the time and that we can use for the same ideas? If you're in a crisis situation and you're trying to compete, hey, what do we have? What can we use that is renewable and useful and, hey, part of world peace? I got to know those people. We had a really nice time. We did a lot of laughing. They were really glad. I got a beautiful basket, and they got their plan for world peace. The husband was very unhappy about the United Nations and about how things were not working. And by the time he got done, the world seemed like a much brighter place for them too. So this is all, world peace is already happening. If we can all start to realize that everybody has something we need, we have something, and we can share with other people, and it helps them. We don't need to have plastic bags if we have these pretty baskets that we can carry on our way to the store, and do our shopping and put it in there like they do around the world. We don't have to pollute the oceans by doing this. We can just use what we have that's renewable and doesn't cause any problems. It's just recyclable. It's grass. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. This is how we're going to go step by step. Our government proposals introduce the idea, but then our newsletters are going to be explaining things, and then we have books that go along with it too, and then we have our programs that help apply all this information. So that's what I just wanted to talk about today, is world peace is not just possible, it's happening. And we are all a part of it. It takes everybody's active participation. But the only people who come in are the people who are being squeezed, and they're looking for solutions, and they have to come back out, and they're willing. Somebody who's just an alcoholic, not an alcoholic, but somebody who just sits and has alcohol to make themselves feel a little bit better. For example, it's Saturday night and we're going out drinking, and that's fine. And then what happens is you have a hard time, and that make you feel better, and all of a sudden you find yourself in this hard situation. Is alcoholism the solution to making yourself feel better? No, it isn't. So up and then out, and create the life you want. Okay, so now that's where we are now as a world. And I just wanted to share with you this idea, because world peace applies to every person, not necessarily at the same time. That's all today. So I ask you to like, share, and subscribe, but most of all share, because this information is important and everybody really needs to hear it. Whether or not they're willing to listen right now, just kind of keep a watch on the world peace, and then when people need it, just share that information and open it up to debate. Okay. Thank you for stopping by.